Hello and welcome back to another episode of Supercoach Insider. My name is Ben.
And I'm Chris.
I'm Swizz.
And thank you for joining us. It's our team-by-team analysis. Sometimes it's long, sometimes it's short. That's just what happens when you go out into the wild world of Supercoach footy. Before we move on, SC Insider 100, you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok. Also, all the audio platforms as well, so Spotify, Soundcloud, Stitcher, you name it. And on the YouTube, Chris.
Yeah, search for Supercoach Insider. Let's get into Melbourne, guys. Let's go.
Melbourne D's also nearly hitting the, I think, 1,800 and something subscribers to YouTube, so about to crack that 2K mark at any point. So thank you for all the love and attention we get on there. We understand a lot of people listen on the audio platforms. I know if I'm driving around the world, I'd be listening as well, but YouTube as well shows us that you really support us as well, because that's our only means of revenue, and it keeps the lap dances for this big guy going on, Chris, and keeps Swizz is also getting getting a share of the cut, etc. this year as well. So that's why
I'm raising a family over here, mate. I ain't got time for that shit.
So I'm going off previous context. But anyway, let's go into Melbourne D's, and they're a very, very interesting team. I think a lot of people are wildly invested in their success and particularly their structure as well. So when we have a look at, Inns, they had a guy called Jed Adams. Don't trust him. 2 first names. Pick 38.
Classic 2 first names.
Yeah, Kaya, Ferris White. Yeah, some category B rookies. Let's go. Brody Grundy, really, really big trade coming in from Collingwood. Hey, they pay part of his salary, Chris. Lockie Hunter traded from Western Bulldogs. I think he's highly underrated. That was a horrible.
That was terrible.
Matt Jefferson, pick 15. Again, 2 first names, Matt and Jeff. Horrible pick. Josh Shackey, even worse pick. Third time lucky for Shackey. But hey, I guess when you get rid of some of your other key forwards that are young, you need some kind of depth. So there it is. And some other rookie sort of players as well, which I'll kind of leave there. Will Verrill, what a feral name. And Oliver Seston is the other one. And apparently he is from Tasmania because his last name is Inceston. Out, Oscar Baker delisted. Belford traded.
Are you on the Scotch, mate? Is it?
I might have, after all the Dylan Moore stuff last time, I might have probably knocked over about a 2.5 drams, I think, in a little bit.
I'm actually just on vodka tonight. I'm not the splash kind, unfortunately, because I don't have any right now. They're all at your house.
I know. I'm hitting him up. We're trying to get some stuff up here, but we'll see what happens. Oscar Baker delisted, Toby Bedford traded to GWS, Mitch Brown retired, Magic Door retired, Hunt free agent to West Coast. What a hunt. Luke Jackson traded to Fremantle's a really big out there. Rosman delisted, Wiedemann traded to Essendon, and that kind of wraps up their ins and outs. And the main ones, I think, Brody Grundy, everyone's talking about. The out from Jackson, and the in for Hunter, I think, is also probably the most notable one because it changes things as far as position and structure. Now, when we look at the fixture, they play Brisbane, Carlton, Hawthorn, North Melbourne, Richmond, and Sydney twice. Now, even though like Brisbane, Carlton, Richmond, Sydney, I think they're pretty close games, but to play Hawks and North Melbourne twice, I think is an absolute win. And their first 4 isn't particularly easy. Well, their first 3 particularly, Bulldogs, Brisbane, and Sydney. So Bulldogs at home, that's not too bad, I guess, hopefully MCG. Brisbane away, probably a difficult run, but they flogged us up here last time, so who's to say? And then Sydney at home. So if you're going to play Sydney, down at the MCG or Etihad would be the way to go. And then West Coast away. So they already play well at Optus. They won a grand final over there. They travelled over there. They play extremely well. Same sort of dynamics as the MCG. But so from that round 4, so West Coast, Bombers, Richmond, North, Suns, and Hawks. Outside of Richmond, it's pretty much a lot of the bottom 6 teams at this current point in time, and that's a huge run. Now, from round 16, so after the bye, from round 16, right, so you got Giants, Saints, Lions, and then Adelaide, Richmond, North, Carlton, Hawks. So it's kind of a 1-for-1. It's a harder opponent, weaker opponent. And again, but you're playing Giants, who I think will be bottom 4, Adelaide, who will be sort of bottom 6, North and Hawks, again, both bottom 4. And I think it's a nice little kind of way to finish up in the year. And the reason we kind of say, particularly with some of these lower teams, is that when you win, you get more pie, like more piece of the pie. And when you're someone like Clayton Oliver, he's towed up some teams massively before with these 200 scores that he throws out once or twice a year. And it's usually was an Adelaide when they weren't performing or a Gold Coast when they weren't performing. And there's definitely some scope for him to do extremely well. Now, when we talk about Clayton Oliver, and he's a $699,000 midfielder, he's extremely expensive, right? And some people on YouTube, right, Abdul, not naming names, but the Abs Magic love what he's doing, and I kind of get really emotional about Clayton Oliver, and I get very defensive because I'm like, who are you starting? There is no other premium. If I could pick one, and to hell with Lachie Neale, to hell with anyone else. If I could pick one premium, it would be Clayton Oliver. And the reason is again, we don't play some draft league where there's no captain scores. We play a VC&C double points for your captain, and there is no better captain to play than Clayton Oliver. So before I pass it over, Clayton Oliver, the last 3 years, he's gone for 51% of the games. So for just slightly more, for that 1% more, every second week he's going 120 or more, which means every second week in the last 3 years, he's given you a captaincy score or above. And out of that, he's actually 32%. So 1 out of every 3 games, he's gone 135 or more. So every second week, you're getting at least a 120. Every third week, you're getting at least a 135, which is an amazing captain score. And he's also got huge ceiling with 176, 177, 178, 204, 205 in the last few years. Huge ceiling. And 92% of his scores are over 93, which means that if he does happen to butcher it, generally speaking, he doesn't go that low. Only 2 scores below 85 in the last 3 years.
He gets enough of it that it doesn't matter. Like even when he's butchering the hell out of the ball, he still gets enough ball that it just trickles over to be a good score by the end of the game. And it's nothing more frustrating than like it's hard. You go in at halftime and it is a non-Clary owner in the early part of last year. He might be on like 35 at like halftime, and I'm like, yes, this is amazing. I can't believe that I'm going to get a win this week. Ha. F you, Clary owners. And then he turns around and he'll go 110 by the end of the game. And I go, oh, sure.
He can pump out 60, 70-point quarters, no dramas at all. And even playing against us, he tells us each time that he just we don't tag. So those early as one of the hardest games in that 6-game run. It's not even a hard game for him.
You have midfielders now, Swizz.
What?
You've got some midfielders now.
Yeah, we do, but still we won't tag. We were talking off air about, who are you going to captain out? If you don't go Clary, what are your other options? And for everybody else that is having him, they will have the captaincy on him. I think, this is the draw that we were just talking about. So Bulldogs round 1, it's a Saturday night. Then they play the Lions on a Friday. Then from then it's
which,
Sunday.
By the way, generally speaking, Clary and Track just have their way with the Dogs for some reason.
Yeah.
Same as Bonton, McRae. The Brisbane Lions love giving.
They shake hands and they just go on and stuff and that. And then then they've got they've got Sunday, Saturday afternoon, Saturday night, Saturday afternoon, Saturday afternoon. So and then not long after that they'll have the normal male what do you call it? The Queen's birthday, King's birthday, whatever it will be
Queen's
this year.
birthday Monday
match, which is always on a Monday. So there's quite a lot of games where he is going to be the second. He's playing later in the round. As good as Melbourne have been, they don't feature. But I think more middle of the year they start featuring a few Friday night games. But he is going to be for those 50% everybody's fallback as the captaincy option. So that as Ben and I were just talking about before, like if you don't have him, there's other players there, your Tukes and your Mills who can put up some monster scores, but they can also put some lesser scores as well. They're not the most reliable captain options. Fantastic VCs so if you're banking on one of those guys as your player, and let's just say it's a Friday night and other people have. Let's just say it's Bont, for example, and Bont goes a 90, and then you're relying on you're sitting there with Miller, and everybody else is sitting there with Clary, and we know every second week Clary's going 120 that we're just banking, and then you're relying on to go. Hopefully, it's a 150 this week and not the 90 or the flat 100 score. So I love Clary because it's just that reliability. I know what I'm getting from him as a captain, and the ability for him to go those massive weeks as well. Like, do I want, we're talking about West Coast, who's probably going to be down the bottom, North Melbourne in particular. If you don't have him by those rounds and he goes at monster 170 to 200, what do you do then? How do you, does that mean you just don't
because
get him for the rest of the year?
you're not missing 170. You're missing 340.
That's
That's
exactly right.
the biggest thing, right? So
only thing you can do there is hope that like your Miller or your Neil or whatever's gone 150 just to keep up with it. But if they don't, then you are cooked.
And when it's 50% owned, you're sliding. Like it's not a
that's
little risk. It's not a Dacos risk where
Yeah.
you're playing Doherty against Dacos and neither of them are captain. Do you know what I mean? And that's one thing I take into huge consideration because I like good VCs and reliable Cs, which is why I think generally I do pretty well as captain scores. Right? You're trying to look at and then go with gut feel as far as like matchups and who you think are going well. And based on gut feel, some people, yes, he's dropped the occasional low score the last 2 years. And notoriously, he hasn't actually gone well against West Coast either. I think he's going like 100 or less. So some people are like, oh, well, he's playing West Coast. They're like a nuffy side. I'm like, okay, well, now that Redden's gone, who's the defensive-minded midfielder that's going to try and keep Clary at bay? And last time, I think they were flying when they played West Coast, and I don't think Clary really cared about the result as much. Redden's gone. So, like, you look at Kelly, yes, okay, Kelly's in there.
it's probably Yo at the moment, but I mean, even Yo is not really going to be.
Or
in there
Cully,
all
like,
the time.
who's going to be but what I'm saying is there's no really experienced defensive-minded mid at the moment at West Coast.
Yeah.
I mean,
So I
surely-
see him tailing up this year.
Well,
so there are reports that they're going to be basically flipping Jinbi, Shui, and Yo off the half back line and through that midfield rotation. I'm not sure what that looks like in game, but that's what they've been sort of training in terms of and what actually Luke Shuey has said. So I mean, look, who knows? But at the end of the day, I don't think it's going to matter. I think he's going to run over the top of them.
Well, sorry, Chris, I'm going to butt in. There's out of those first 8 weeks, he's got 4 games there. The Lions, Richmond, North, and Gold Coast. He has career averages of 120 against the Lions, 116 against us, 120 against North, and 131 against the Suns. That's career averages. And we all know, like, first couple of years a player comes on the scene, and it's usually quite low. So just a guy that reliably just puts up massive scores against them. And even the Swans, his last 3 against the Swans have been 134, 125, 130. Like, he just doesn't miss out against these teams.
And Clary's average is more reliable. It's more reliable because he broke out in his second season. I know because Chris took him in draft before I did. So when a guy averages 115 in their second season, or I think it was about 115, he's pretty much been a premium ever since that second year. So, but you know his career average against those teams is quite reliable because he broke out in that second year. It's not like a Tuke Miller who took quite a while and did some tagging roles and then finally became premium. So all those are skewed. His average against an opponent for his career is quite accurate.
And you got to remember as well, there's another. This is another context to it. He's the highest CBA midfielder there, and I know that my lovely partner loves me CBA. So
CBA.
You should really get Commonwealth Bank to sponsor this podcast.
Right. She just said she's heard that 75 times today. But at 87%, that's 12% higher than the next, which is Jack Viney, and then Petrarca as well with the same amount, 75%. So he's going to be in there the most. And then he's also going to have the 2 best ruck in the league in there 100% of the time. So it's now not just Max Gawn, it's also Brodie Grundy. So he's going to get the best tap ruckman in the competition, constantly tapping down. I mean, the only way it could be better is if it was Max Gawn and Nick Natanui. Like, literally, like, that would be sick to watch, by the way.
So, and when he goes, and not even just that, it's now going up to the forward line, and you're going to have one of them resting up forward. So the flick out the back or the silver service where him and Petrarca potentially can get on the end and kick more goals. The other thing is,
can we tie these 2 guys in together as well? Seeing that we're talking about these,
we probably could. But
absolutely.
And they do, and it's probably fair because they were the biggest Monty last year to win the flag after 10 rounds. They were absolutely flying, and then they obviously had some issues and fell off. So they're going to be super hungry this year to rebound too. So
the key, unfortunately, with that and with Melbourne has been their forward line structure. It actually falls down incredibly when they get an injury, and they had Tom McDonald obviously down last year, and it just threw out their entire forward structure. Ben Brown's not the solution, and I think that's been established quite well. He's back from health though. Tommy Mack apparently is all good to go for round one, and by all reports, they should have a fully functioning forward line, hopefully, fingers crossed. Now, if that's the case, they're going to be really hard to beat this year. But they add that dynamic of a Brodie Grundy or a Max Gawn forward, which is a complete mismatch nightmare when you've already got Ben Brown, you've already got Tom McDonald. Like, who is the team that has three guys that are 195 plus sitting in their defensive line, ready to take these guys, and for strength as well? So that's going to be a unique situation that will change things.
Apparently, Melbourne have been toweling up the preseason too. They've had, I think it was a journalist or someone or other's gone and visited a few teams, and he just said Melbourne are switched on. Like, they are training so intense, and they're hitting each other. Like, they are fully invested.
They are really hungry because they missed an absolute golden opportunity last year.
They did a reverse Stephen Bradbury last year.
So they'll be. So I think they come out.
Were they straight sets?
It could happen again. Yeah, I think it was
Brisbane.
Straight sets, yeah.
Sydney, Brisbane. Bye bye.
It's not the first time they've been out in straight sets, though, I guess. So.
But
that's the Brisbane chase down.
Even if it was to happen again later in the year, but they are going to start the season absolutely so fired up. Yeah, I wouldn't want to be playing them in that first sort of 4 to 6 weeks.
Now, touching on obviously the Grundy and Gawn situation, I'm very anti choosing either of them. And I think this is a big topic of conversation because a lot of people are loving the Grundy pick. I personally hate the Grundy pick. So just to start this conversation, can I get a estimate average from you guys on what you think Grundy will average?
115, 130, somewhere between. I think he's about. I think he's 100. He's somewhere between 100 and 105.
Yeah,
Ben?
I've got about 100. My only saving grace is that I don't think he's really been injured this preseason, and I think Max Gawn, if he takes the back seat and if Grundy gets enough forward DP, he might actually get DPP, which is probably the only reason I might consider him because he's value. But if I do select him, I'm quite knowingly going into that season expecting that I might have to trade him.
Yeah, so my issue
which is bad,
this. So,
but rucks suck.
Yeah, and they do. And so that's where the door opens, right? So my issue with Grundy in its entirety is I actually think he averages less than 100. I think he's probably more 90 to 100. The reason for that is he's actually not a very good forward. So, yes, I think if he's getting 35% forward time, which I think he does, he probably does get that. I think that's way too much. He proved last year when he dual rucked with Cameron that he couldn't average more. What would he average? 103. And that's when he was like 70-30 ruck. Now, if he goes to actually be a more of a forward, he's going to average even less. And he's only ever averaged in his career, I think his best ever year was 0.8 goals a year, per game, for the year. Yeah, Gawn is the same. He actually has the same goals per game ratio as Gawn. They're both not great forwards.
Gawn can actually take good contested marks. It's just
he just can't convert.
His set shot kicking is one of the worst. It's like Dangerfield-like.
Which is why that he's moved to sit behind the ball as opposed to...
He still made the minor premiers, though, the other year. Goal after the siren, remember? Minor premiers, Melbourne.
He did, but till then...
Oh, he's a butcher.
He absolutely butchers it in that.
Especially against Geelong. He loves hitting it. He loves hooking it against Geelong.
I'm actually surprised that's nearly the setup because I nearly thought they would have gone with Gawn, start him in the back line, and their actual proper sixth defender starts at the corner of the wing, defensive wing, and runs back. And Gawn's just becomes your intercept mark because he does it so well.
I think
there will be stoppages where you'll see both of them in the centre bounce, and Gawn then from the centre bounce moves behind the ball, and you have Grundy as the third midfielder because he's actually very good at follow-up and groundwork, and his tackle pressure is fantastic around stoppages. So I can see situations where they start them both, Gawn rolls back, and then Grundy follows the ball because he can play. I think you can possibly play him like you did Jackson at times as an extra on baller. My issue is that the scoring just isn't there. The role's not there for the scoring, and I would love it to be there because I'm a big Grundy fan. I'm a huge Grundy fan. He's been one of my favorite players for like 10 years. He's not even that. I don't even think he's been in the league that long. But
Trelaw over Grundy, yes.
What we saw with Grundy's points transition is he was there was 2 years in a row where he went 99, he went 99, 99, and then bang went 130. And I think he went 130, 130, and then started his downward progression with his scoring. And he hasn't had an upward year since he's started to go back down and back down and back down. I don't think that is going to happen this year. And he was 103. It doesn't make any, I would love to grab onto a single reason why he's a good selection, but I cannot for the life of me find one.
I think
it's Grundy.
He's talking about Grundy.
Okay. Because I more thought the
downward spiral came with the salary, Chris.
Yeah.
Once he got paid on a 7-year deal or whatever it was, then it's like, 130, 130, and then slowly but surely down.
I still think he's going to be more around that ball and hitting down to those sort of players in Oliver and Petrarca. I still think he's around that 100 mark. That's it.
I could be sold in that preseason though. When you see two games of them lined up could swing.
100's only valuable if he gets forward like DPP.
Yeah,
right.
Agreed.
It's not valuable at all if he stays in the ruck.
But you got to remember there is going to be games. I think we've gone just because now of his age and everything. They're going to towel teams up. I can see worlds where Gawn gets 3/4 time, off you go, and Grundy's going to run around and do whatever is sold.
That could be the case as well, because you would assume that Gawn's the one that gets traded, gets subbed, right? Because body concerns is probably a little bit high.
Wouldn't be surprised if Gawn gets rested some games
playing for finals. Yeah. Playing for finals.
Yeah.
Let's go into Gawn though, because he is 622,000. He's very expensive.
Blanket
31 years of aged. 31 years of aged. What was that?
Blanket no, just straight off the bat.
Yep.
Yeah, blanket no. But when we just look at it though, he's still had 7 scores of 125 or more and 3 scores of 150. Obviously, Grundy coming in does impact things and changes we've already said, but slight hamstring in mid-January, but back to full training February 8th, so there's no real issue there. He got back in and started doing ruck work. Now, the funny part with him, though, even though he's 622,000, which is already an inflated price, he only went 100 plus 55% of games. So when he went over 100, he went big, but he still went under 100 in 45% of his matchups, and 20 of those were actually, 20% was under 80. So even if you did rate him,
if you didn't have him, you wanted to just punch yourself in the face. And then I remember wasn't it the game that he went absolutely massive, but he also got injured or something, and then had multiple games off. So he went huge, but also
I think that was because there was definitely some frustration with that. Where was he there? No, because that wasn't the Collingwood game. He only got 70. It was the week before he got the 198. Just absolutely slaughtered it. And then against the Pies, it was 70, and then see you later. Wasn't playing for a few weeks after that.
So people traded him in after his 198, going, I've got to get him in, And then he just went and just
straight out again. The Gawn discussion leads into round 15 for us this year because they don't have the last bye for the first time in a while, and he should have dual position status.
But unfortunately, Grundy and Gawn still share the same bye.
Well, that's the funny thing about it. But I think he'll have his dual position status, and depending on his price, and we'll obviously know what's going on with all their setup, I think that could become something relevant that we'll be talking about throughout the season. But you shouldn't even be considering starting him.
That's the thing. I think with both of these guys, I don't mind picking him up during the year once you understand their role, what their output's looking like, how they're working together. But to jump in at this point in time and just be whatever, I just that for me is just it's flabbergasting. How many? I'm going to see ownership. What's the ownership like with these guys? Because
I'll let Swizz look that up, but it's pretty much like putting money on a roulette wheel and giving it a spin and hoping it comes out red, to be honest. That's kind of it.
So we got Grundy at 16%. He's the third most highest demon. And Gawn's amazingly at 3.5%. So
okay. 3.5% that's there.
But the Grundy one's interesting at 16.
Is that higher than Darcy Cameron?
I'll tell you how that is with the rucks.
Darcy Cameron's higher. He's like 30%.
Of the premium rucks, number one is naturally Rowan Marshall. Then we've
Yep.
got
Yep.
English at
choice.
26 and Darcy Cameron at 26.
Yep.
Then Grundy,
Okay.
and then it's Daylight.
You see,
Yeah, so much open.
The thing with Cameron over Grundy is purely the fact that he's already forward status. One thing you don't want to be doing is running into
And
round
cheaper.
7 and Grundy's on 34% and he just doesn't quite get it. You know what I mean? Like, that would be terrible.
I think the only issue with Cameron is where he's at with his injury. And that's how
I think
he's for that.
I think he's definitely back in full training.
Yeah, he's back in
he's some
training
ruck work,
looking
I think.
fine. That's no problems. But yeah, Grundy, yeah, I was surprised at 16%. That's quite interesting.
Let's move on. Christian Petrarca, a midfielder, 618,000. I think it's got to be a straight up blanket no as far as starting for the season. And it's kind of like a Zach Merritt sort of type where you're interested and you could start him because you rate him and he's a really good player, but you just know that in the nature of the way that they play and the fact that they kind of go on these little runs where they might drop a bad game or two, that you can always pick them up cheaper. And there's no point paying $618,000 for a guy you could probably get for $550, $560, $570 throughout the year and pick up on a nice run.
What did he drop down to last year? It was low 500, wasn't it?
478.
Yeah, he got super low. And the reason was he actually averaged, I think it was about 114 in the first 8 rounds. And he also averaged 114 in the last 7. But he dropped a few of these scores in the middle. And there was a few linked up, and I think that's kind of why he definitely did drop out. I think I got him at 520 and he kept going down.
His deviation for premium midfielders, it's got to be the worst in the comp. Because look at these scores. He goes 97, then a 189, 91, a 141, 81, 134. He is all over the shop. So he's fun. He can be interesting to own, especially if he's playing early and you've got the VC on him, because he's the perfect VC guy. But at the same time, he can put up some absolute stinkers when you're playing league.
Chris, what do we call that when someone goes 50, 100, 50, 100, 50, 100, basically? The up and down. Adelaide player, now gone to Gold Coast, still doesn't get a game.
Rory Atkins.
Yeah, the Atkins. Remember Atkins used to go every week in draft, you'd put him 50, 100, 50, 100, 50, 100.
That was classic. Which week is it this week?
Yeah, which week? And he alternates.
So the scary thing from a track perspective is that end of last year when Andy Brayshaw moved into that midfield, his CBA is actually plummeted. So something to watch is, are we seeing Brayshaw the midfielder or are we seeing Brayshaw back behind the ball? Does Christian Salem have a say in that? I know that he's got that thyroid issue at the moment. Is that going to impact his starting game at the start of the season? All of these are questions, right? So let's just put
it's the last 4 rounds is what you're looking for.
Yeah,
the last 4 rounds. Brayshaw had the last 4 rounds, including the last 2 finals, as far as how his CBAs went up, because I want to talk about him in a second.
Right. So Petrarca's went down to 57%, 66%, 46%, 34%, 63%, and then 44% again. So it really dropped off those last 6 rounds for track.
And he averaged between 75 at his low and kind of up to around 96% CBA. So he did fluctuate, a lot of 80s. And he pretty much dropped down at least, 20%, you'd say, at a minimum, and a low of 34. Wow.
Yeah. And so conversely, you see in those same games, you see Brayshaw had 57%, 59%, 71, 76, 52, and 59. So in those same games, Brayshaw went up. Now, scoring-wise, is there a correlation, which is the next step? So let me just have a quick squeeze.
Yeah, I've got it here. Brayshaw from the Bulldogs, which is round 19. So he's gone 122, 123, 113, 113, 83 to finish the season.
I can tell you Brayshaw averaged 108 for those last 4 rounds, and that trend continued into the finals for those 2 weeks. So I'm really, really happy there. Petrarca, I don't think it really mattered too much, to be honest, because round 20 to 23, he went 134, 136, 99, 117. And again, he averaged 114 over those last 7. So it didn't really impact Petrarca.
Yeah, so that's a huge red flag for me, because what they then see is that, okay, well, we don't necessarily need Petrarca to be as a centre bounce midfielder. What we need
because Petrarca was doing the exact same thing. If you watch Sam Walsh in some of the games, they were starting them as the half-forward flanker inside 50 because they've got to be there, but those two sprint towards the contest. So all of a sudden you've got 7 midfielders because obviously the 2 wings come in, but imagine having Petrarca or Walsh in Carlton's, because they both were doing the same thing, followed by the third best defender, fourth, whoever the defender. Now they've got to come and play midfield against a Walsh or a Petrarca. So Petrarca just, great, I'll sprint up. I'll get the handball from Clary or Brayshaw and just go and do my thing. Or if he can double back and then he finds himself loose inside 50 and he's still able to kick goals. So, yeah, they don't need Petrarca to start in the centre bounce because he still just gets involved in it.
Let's link in Angus Brayshaw because we did talk about him. 550,000 as a defender only, which I think is where the benefit comes from. The real thing is to watch it because, again, I think Melbourne were not in great sorts. They weren't winning the back end of the year, so they changed it up, and I thought they changed up quite successfully, and I thought Brayshaw added a different dynamic, but the issue is you still have, again, Clary, Petrarca, and Viney. So Viney's probably the biggest issue for me because how much CBA can Brayshaw really get while Viney is still playing mid? And it's kind of like a Liberatore where I can't see Viney really playing anywhere else. And that's the big issue. So, But when you look at those last 4 rounds, 108 average over those 4, the reason I think it could be possible is because now I know Salem obviously has a thyroid issue, but even though they have like Bowie and a few of these others, I think Brayshaw, Salem probably still plays, right? So I think they have enough depth in that area to kind of get away with it. And you also bring in Lockie Hunter, and the biggest relevance he has is that the Seagull is a very underrated winger. So you bring those two things into the mix. And last year, Brayshaw was playing in defence because they really had injuries and they needed him. And then once that kind of got covered a little bit, he then went and played on the wing. And it wasn't until those last 4 games where the average really went up and went into the CBAs. So now you have, if Salem's back and Bowie and some of these other people, plus now a guy who can actually genuinely play on the wing, it could open up for him to get some of those 50% CBAs and have 100 to 105 average for the season.
That is true. The other thing, but for Brayshaw, outside that game where he absolutely just, seagulled against Essendon, what did he take, like 20-something marks?
Yeah, heaps
got
of
the 176. But some of these he scored 67, 72, 83, 54, and there's another one, 83. And those opponents were Gold Coast, GWS, West Coast, North Melbourne, Adelaide. So against the weak teams, he just doesn't score. And
was he a defender or a winger, though,
need to be or whatever, but against the good teams, 102 against Geelong, Doggies 122, Freo 123, Pies 126, Sydney 130. So, and maybe that's just a case that Melbourne are like, okay, we're up against the good sides. We need Brayshaw in the, it might have to be the centre bounce or they think they need him down back at half back, but they put him where the ball and where he's required in those games. Where the weak teams, he's just, he can just walk around and do whatever he wants or doesn't need to get himself involved.
Or they could have had those injuries last year and he was playing defence against a team that didn't really take it to their defence.
But those games are spread it out too. So it's not like, okay, they've played 4 or 5 week games. And we've just said about that draw outside of round 3, but it gets real soft for
very
them.
Soft.
So does that mean, they don't need Brayshaw, Bowie and Salem and all those guys can go and do the thing. And Brayshaw can just sit back and just sit on the wing and, just get involved when he has to.
If he looks a genuine part of the guts, though, I am genuinely interested. More for the 550, it's kind of like a halfway gap. It's a little bit more than 50,000 more than or 40,000 more than Young and day cost, etc. But it's also a little bit cheaper than the $600,000 players.
Well, 80. It's about 80,000 cheaper than Sinclair, and that
which is crazy.
Technically playing the same role, and that so.
Yeah, it'd be interesting, and I did have some reservations about him. Obviously having concussion injuries and stuff like that in the past, but when you look at his last few years as well, he's still played 95% of the last 3 years, so I can't be that concerned when he's put actually quite a lot of games together.
Well, Frico actually put out a tweet saying that whether he's played midfield or defence, he actually averaged the same.
Yeah, but that includes wing though as the midfield. Yes.
Yes, but he's not playing he's not playing as a primary centre back. Even in the games that he was in the midfield at the end of the year, he wasn't playing as a primary centre back mid. He was a third or fourth mid. He was not the 75%. He was 50, 60.
I'd like to know his time on ground in those games where it's the weaker oppositions versus the higher oppositions, because I wonder if they kind of do that and more manage him and stuff, because they know they're winning those games where when he has to, because it's amazing that all his high scores are against all the top sides.
Interesting. Moving on from probably premiums, I think some mid prices and probably a real quick touch on them. there's not too much, to be honest, as far as that. There's probably more draft relevancy for Melbourne, but Salem was someone people were considering, probably now even a draft option, because I think a lot of people will pass on him. But surprisingly, people were putting Salem in their team for $390K. I thought he was too expensive to be putting in a standard team, let alone be considering. But anyway, so yeah, he was on a modified program for thyroid issues now. Last time he had thyroid issues, I think he dropped about 5Ks. So that's not really one for me. Could be a bench option, Swizz, a late bench option. Better than
I
who was that guy you
don't think you're
recommended?
getting him that late.
Haynes?
Because there'll be too much hype. There'll be people that like Salem.
Yeah,
That's
true. All think he'll be all right. And
I avoid someone like him because someone will pay over more than what I'm willing to pay.
I'm definitely avoiding. And the other one is now handcuffed into him because Salem's out. Bowie, $380,000 defender, very similarly priced. Like, hey, I'll just take one and bring in the other guy. But if you are that person, don't do it. Don't be that desperate for him. He did his job last year when he was cheap enough. He still scored so under 80 Supercoach in 70% of his games. So he's not someone that I'm kind of looking at.
The thing with Bowie, though, is that when he averaged 19 points per game more when Salem was out versus when he was in. So if Salem is actually missing games, then Bowie could be a good shout for I wouldn't say standard, because that 19 points difference is between 51 and 70 points per game.
Yeah,
like,
correct.
It's definitely like a draft. Okay, well, yeah, he's
I've
out.
heard big things from him from pre-season. He's been absolutely dominating the track.
So maybe 80 in a draft. I wouldn't put him in standard though, would you, Swizz?
No, you wouldn't have him in standard, but
No.
yeah, I'd be more Bowie. You'd pick up at real value in the draft, like that last pick. That's where those last couple picks, and that way Salem, somebody's going to take him at some point. They're going to see him go, oh yeah, Christian Salem, I'll take him. Where no one, I think, is going to go, oh yeah, I need to take Jack Bowie. And that way,
the smoky draft option guys is actually Cozzy Pickett. So he's actually been playing a lot through the midfield and as a CBA midfielder. And I think he's that sort of striker style mid that is going to be in there for the CBA and not necessarily follow the ball for the rest of the day, but he's going to then rotate forward. And I think this is a big thing for him. This is a contract year for him. Basically, I think that they're doing this purely to try and save him and not have him go back west. I literally think that he's just said to them, look, if I'm not going to get in the midfield, I don't want to be here. I don't think he wants to play forward
Eddie
for his
Betts
entire
played as a midfielder for Adelaide, and I think nearly 100 average, I think, as a forward. It was like, take a dynamic forward and then throw him in the midfield, and he averaged absolutely crazy at the start of the year one year.
But apparently, by all reports, he's absolutely killing it in there. So,
he's
to watch.
Quick and dynamic, and he's very evasive. Yeah. So he's not someone you want to have. If you're standing in front of him, he is not someone that you'd. It's hard to tackle him.
If I'm an opposition midfielder, I don't want Cozzy Pickett in that midfield. I want someone else. I'll take a plodding midfielder who wants to stand there and be still so I can tackle him. Like, no, he'll run rings around me. I'm not interested in that. But
he's someone that you'd be trying to argy barge, hold, pinch. You'd be doing the who was that Hawthorn guy? The old pinchy winchy. I'd be trying to get under his skin.
Craig Kelly.
Yeah, push, shove, hold. I'd be doing whatever I could because
I was thinking Judd did all of that, didn't he? And the chicken wing.
the chicken wing. Pressure point.
Pressure point.
You're talking about your kind of your draft smoking.
Hang on. Draft. Can we go through? There's only one breakout and one rookie, and then we'll pretty much finish off on draft discussion because you got to link in Viney and May.
And I was just looking at them, but that's cool. Let's go your rookie.
So the breakout contender is none. I have no one breaking out except for Clayton Oliver to break out and win the Brownlow and probably go over 130 Supercoach. That's pretty much the breakout there. Rookie is the Jacob Van Rooyen, who we've spoken about, I think, briefly. Now, forward 123,000 was impressive, was tipped in and could play with Ben Brown injured, although only problem is Ben Brown's now back training and with the main group, so I'm not quite sure about his outlook at this current point in time, and he's actually still heavily quite owned. So there was a reason for him, but now I think that reason's kind of shriveled up. Boys, what do you think? Swizz, I think you're in agreement that he used to be relevant and now not so much?
100%.
All right, and
I don't like key forwards anyway in standard. So, yeah.
Who was the
especially rookie key forwards?
Who was that Hawthorn key forward that you missed out on, Chris? And he just happened to get 100 that week, and you're like, you're kidding me. Kissed on the D. Hawthorn, was it a year ago, 2 years ago? 2 years ago. Swizz, can you remember? Hawthorn key forward.
No, got nothing.
Older guy. Oh, it was like not Cozzy. That's not it.
Oh yeah, no,
Kaczynski?
Yeah,
No.
Kaczynski, but wasn't he playing backline? Yeah, he was playing. He was a defender, but he kicked the 6 goals or something up forward.
Yeah, that's right.
I didn't have him.
Yeah, that's right. That guy. Yeah, that's right. All right, Swizz, who do you want to talk in for the draft?
That's right. That's not one to talk to draft. I actually think Lockie Hunter might be an interesting option there. And he, as much as we make fun of him of being at the Seagull, and I still laugh at that photo I took that day at Marvel.
He's an expert at getting space, right?
Where the Seagulls were more in the contest than he was. He's
apparently NASA's trying to hire him for his next job.
He's had some really good averages in Supercoach for a long time.
Yep.
And the thing is, he's played a lot of his career at Marvel where it's probably hasn't suited wingers as much. Now he's got the MCG to, roam around and be even a bigger Seagull but he's
there are more Seagulls at the MCG than there are at Marvel. That's
he's
true.
A genuine decent winger. Like he had that 1 year where he went 115. Now he's not coming out and doing that, but he at his best, he is one of the best wingers in the league.
And it's funny because I hear people say like, oh, Langdon's the best winger in the whole competition and he doesn't average well. I'm like, yes, but they play different styles.
They're very different. And
very, very different. One of them, is extremely good. So Langdon will get back in defense and get a fist in on a one-on-one. It's crazy. Yeah. Whereas Seagull is definitely a link-up player to kind of either through the switch or in that transition to get you into open space and then link up in transition into that forward 50. And that can get you a lot more points.
Langdon's still good enough to go 85, 90. That's the thing. On the other side, Hunter can, obviously do that too. But I just think people are going to look and go, it's Lockie Hunter. Where I think
Langdon,
value.
a lot of his running is unrewarded.
Yeah,
and,
that too.
And whereas Hunter, I think he just gets more of the ball because that's, we call him the Seagull. And because he gets more ball, he just averages more. So I think he's definitely a relevant option. I don't know where I'd pick him in draft though, because I think it's a really... as a midfielder, I wouldn't mind picking him even as my last mid, maybe on field. I'd love him as a bench option because I'm not sure where he quite goes. You can probably get him quite cheap, Like Lockie Hunter averaging 71.
He's priced at under 400. So I'm trying to think where does
71.2 average.
He comes in, and this is what I love about this because those guys are under 400. Now, some of these guys are dual position I can't take out, but he's at the 107th midfielder if you're scrolling down, which will include some forwards and some defenders. So if you're in a, say, 10-team league, you've got six midfielders. So that's 60. Now, some of those will take out the dual position. Let's just say there might be 15 of them. Yeah, you're probably picking him up as your last midfielder or your bench.
This is why you don't use the app when trying to find players. That's why you use a spreadsheet and you have it by averages, and then you filter in and you change those averages based on projections.
Because he's 10 spots below, say, a Rory Sloane, for example, or Harry Morrison, or these sort of guys just going down like, okay, I'm not taking him, or Paul Seedsman or someone like that. But then, there'll be somebody who'll have that list and be like, Lockie Hunter's next to my thing. And while you're scrambling on your 1 minute time limit and going, oh, hang on, who do I take? Jared Berry or Daniel McKenzie or that? And the next person behind you is going, oh, why didn't you take Lockie Hunter? Thank you. I'll take my 85, 90 guy.
Yeah, I agree. And quick disclosure as well, the spreadsheets are pretty much what we use for a lot of our preseason stats, and there's injuries and a whole bunch of stuff, so 100 plus, time on ground, averages, you name it. It's pretty much jacked up. And we've been working with Azza from Jock Reynolds as well, and he's just an absolute, insane with spreadsheets. And it's funny because I used to think I was good at spreadsheets until you look at all these formulas that people do, and I'm like, holy crap, I know nothing about spreadsheets. So if you're one of those people, good on you because it's quite challenging. But this spreadsheet will get released. I had a chat with Azza, and it'll be released before the trial games go. So within about a week or so, week and a half, pretty much by the time we wrap up our series. So we want to do our team-by-team analysis, so that way it's exclusive for us, and then it'll go out to all the plebs and all the other podcasts can start stealing all the stats and using it in their content because, we were there first. So stay tuned for that. I've had a couple of people already message like, hey, when's the spreadsheet? Where's the spreadsheet? If you do have a draft coming up exclusively in the meantime, you might hit me up and I might feel gracious, but otherwise, just wait a week and a bit. Otherwise for draft, I think the only other ones that really Viney is one, serviceable but misses games. I wouldn't be paying overs for him. Stephen May's gone 90 plus the last couple of years with some really good runs, and he's not bad for kind of a mid-range defender. So I wouldn't like Stephen May as my kind of D1, D2.
The only
but
problem with
he's
Stephen May is
serviceable.
he has an absolute monopoly on the kickouts. He had 151 kickouts, I think, from just over 200 last year. So he's by far and away the number one kickout taker there. So if you take that out of his repertoire, he's a completely average defender. So you just got to make sure that he's still their number one guy moving forward, which I think he is.
Makes sense. And the last one was Jack Lever, I think, averaged a lot less last year, and he went 90 odd, I think, the year before that. So as an intercepting kind of defender, I think there's definitely a little bit of scope for Lever as a defender to go, like, even if you pick him up at an 80, when you get into your D5 and your bench, and if you have a little spot there, I don't mind picking up a guy who could push 85, 90 and picking him up at a 80 or below average. So I think he's definitely worth a shake. What do you think? Lever's
the one I'm debating because he's literally the 20th player I've got in all my keeper leagues at the moment. I've been debating about keeping him or not because I think there's a world where he could definitely go, 90 again. But I think if Melbourne improve and just their setup, and if Gawn potentially sees a bit more time behind the ball,
then there's intercepts gone.
It's probably his intercepts are gone.
I think that's it. We're definitely not talking about Shaki or anyone else, boys. Any other smokies that we're missing out on?
No, I think that pretty much goes through everything for me.
Wonderful. Very challenging team. A lot of talks about rucks. And look at that. It's a 46-minute sort of deadline. I think we nailed this one.
That's good. I like this one.
Nailed it. Swizz and I didn't abuse each other about speculative picks. It was quite pleasant, I think. Everyone was on board. Everyone was on board and supportive. This is it's like childcare for seniors.
Well, buddy.
That wraps us up for Melbourne. Hey, well, who's next? Melbourne?
North.
Oh, yeah. Wonderful. 46 minutes into 15. Stay tuned. Stay tuned for North Melbourne, and we'll
15
see
15 minutes just on Jack Zeeble. Let's go.
Yeah. Oh, no. Oh, I just realized we're going to have to talk about Zeeble. I was like, I can talk about Taron Thomas. I can talk about anyone. And you know what the worst part is? I'm actually coming around to your stupid idea. But we'll get into that on the next. We'll get into that on the next podcast. We'll see you soon.
See you guys.
Boy.